Sign this form. Uncle Victor is giving me $600 for you. That's exactly what the new 4K TV costs. My mother jammed a plastic clipboard into my chest, blocking the doorway with her body so I couldn't step inside. I was 14 years old, standing on our concrete stoop with a suitcase and a backpack, my breath turning white in the winter air. She was trading me for electronics. She curled her lip. "You finally have a use, Mara. Buying me something nice." Over her shoulder, I could already see the blank rectangle of wall above the sagging couch. That was where the TV would go, my replacement. I did not cry. I did not beg. I took the cheap hotel pen she handed me, signed the guardianship transfer papers where she pointed, and turned away from the house I'd grown up in. As I walked down the shoveled path into the slush-dark street, one clear thought cut through the cold. My price tag was exactly $600. 16 years later, that girl in the too-thin coat was gone. In her place stood a 30-year-old senior forensic analyst for a private trust company. On paper, my job is dry. I review ledgers, tax returns, and trust documents. In reality, my job is hunting liars. I don't rely on gut feelings. I rely on mismatched numbers, timestamps that don't align, signatures that wobble. I don't need to sense when someone's lying. I just need the receipts. Uncle Victor Hale, the man who bought me, didn't raise me with lullabies or apologies for what he'd witnessed on that porch. He raised me with rules. He was a stone-faced, chain-smoking accountant who saw the world as a scoreboard of debits and credits. Most nights, he sat in his book-lined study, cigar burning low in a cut-glass ashtray, and drilled his philosophy into me. "Mara, tears don't balance a ledger. Emotions are expensive. Evidence is free. Keep every receipt." I did. While I was studying compliance law and internal controls, my biological parents were studying something else entirely, the art of the scam. They assumed I'd vanished into the system or ended up dead in some unmarked file. They never checked. They didn't need facts. They had a better story. They turned me into a business model. Every January, on the anniversary of the snowstorm, they stood on that same front porch for the local news. I know because I have every clip saved in an encrypted folder on my home server labeled Archive 1. Inside that folder, a decade and a half of performances. My mother, Denise, with carefully smudged eyeliner talking into a microphone about her mentally unstable daughter who'd run off in a blizzard. My father, Brian, behind her, eyes shiny at all the right moments. They asked the community for prayers and help funding the ongoing search, and the community paid. I watched from a distance as donation jars appeared at grocery store counters, as online fundraisers ticked upward, as strangers mailed checks to the Find Mara Fund. Then I watched the search money at work, Brian trading in his rusty sedan for a newer truck, Denise posting photos of their dream kitchen renovation, online, granite counters, farmhouse sink, just months after one of their biggest televised pleas. They turned my erasure into a revenue stream. But the public donations were just the visible layer. The real theft was buried where people rarely look, in government systems. Because they believed I was a ghost, they never took my name off anything. For 16 years, Denise and Brian claimed me as a dependent on their federal tax returns. They collected state assistance, welfare, housing subsidies, food benefits for a child who did not live under their roof and hadn't since she was 14. By the time I added it all up, they'd extracted roughly $165,000 in cash and benefits under my name. They committed tax fraud, benefits fraud, and wire fraud every year, signing under penalty of perjury that the information was true, correct, and complete. They did it assuming no one would ever audit the file of a girl who'd run away and died. They didn't know the dead girl worked in compliance. And I didn't stop them. I didn't send a stern letter. I didn't call the fraud hotline. I didn't knock on their door and announce I'd survived. I let them keep going. I treated their crimes like an investment account, accruing interest. Every time Denise clutched a tissue for the camera, I saved the broadcast. Every time Brian's name appeared on a digitized PAX record listing Mara, daughter, as a dependent, I downloaded it. They thought they were getting away with it. They didn't realize their lost child was building a case file with their names on it. I was waiting for leverage. It came on a gray Thursday in October, in the form of a heart attack. Uncle Victor died exactly the way he lived, quietly, with all his bills paid. He left behind a simple will, notarized years earlier, that left his entire estate, everything, to me. A mixed-use commercial building in the city center with long-term tenants, a conservative but healthy investment portfolio, several sizable CDs and checking accounts. Altogether, about $11.8 million. Because it was a contested-size estate, the will was sealed for 30 days, standard procedure. But greed doesn't slow greed, it accelerates it. My biological parents did not come to the funeral. They did not send flowers, they did not call. What they did do, 48 hours after Victor's obituary ran in the paper, was hire a lawyer. His name was Jack Keene, the kind of attorney you see on bus stop benches and late-night commercials promising, "We don't get paid unless you do." Professional contingency hunter. He filed a petition to challenge the will. On paper, their claim was dripping with self-righteousness. As my natural parents, they argued they were the rightful heirs. They said I had alienated their daughter, then exerted undue influence over an elderly, vulnerable man to secure the estate. Then they did what they do best, spun the story for cameras. I watched it happen from my darkened office, the blue light of my monitor washing the room in cold. Denise, on that same chipped front step where she'd sold me, this time in a conservative black dress. The local reporter asked about the inheritance. She looked straight into the lens and let a single practiced tear fall. "We don't care about money," she said softly. "We just want to save Mara's soul. Victor was troubled. She manipulated him in his final days. We just want to keep the family together and manage things the right way." Professional-grade gaslighting. She cast herself as the grieving saint, me as the predatory niece, Victor a senile old fool. My phone lit up with an incoming call. Naomi, my attorney, sounded like she'd bitten through a pencil. "We're filing defamation in the morning," she snapped. "I want a statement out tonight. We have the will, we have the care records. We can bury this." I stared at Denise's familiar front porch on my screen, at the very door she'd closed in my face 16 years earlier. "No," I said. "Don't respond." "What?" There's a quote Victor made me memorize when I was studying for my first ethics exam. Napoleon, "Never interrupt your enemy when he is making a mistake." I let that settle. If we hit them now, this stays a messy civil inheritance fight. He said, she said. Emotional, expensive. And if we don't, they'll get cocky. They'll lean harder into the lie. And sooner or later, they'll put that lie in writing. I didn't want a larger slice of the estate. I wanted a verdict. I need them to swear to their story, under oath, on paper, in a room with a recording. Naomi was silent for a long moment. "What do you want me to do?" "Call Keene. Sound rattled. Tell him I'm falling apart under the attention, that I can't handle the press. Offer mediation. Say I want to make it all go away quietly if they'll just be reasonable." "You're feeding them red meat," she muttered. "That's the point. They only walk happily into traps that smell like free money." The mediation was set for the following Monday at 9 in the morning. That gave me 3 days to assemble my arsenal. I didn't need to hack Victor's computer or guess his passwords. For all his cynicism, he was old-fashioned, distrustful of anything that lived on a server he didn't physically control. He trusted steel. I drove to his house, the only home that had ever actually been mine. In his study, dust motes drifted in the weak afternoon light. It still smelled of cedar shelves and stale smoke. Behind his desk, bolted to the floor, sat a heavy fireproof safe. I knelt, spun the dial to the numbers etched into my memory, the date of my high school graduation, and felt the internal tumblers thunk into place. The handle gave with a deep mechanical groan. Inside, amid neatly bound folders of property deeds and bond certificates, was a single red accordion file. No label, no dust. I slid it out. It had weight, the kind that can level a dynasty. I sat at Victor's desk, took a breath, and opened it. On top lay a disc in a slim plastic case, one of those old mini DVDs with the iridescent underside. In Victor's uncompromising block letters, the label read, "Front Porch, Jan 3rd, 2007. Victor had installed a cheap security camera over his front door years before doorbell cams were trendy. He worried about packages. Instead, he captured a transaction, the only recording of the moment Denise turned her daughter into store credit. My hands went still over the file. Victor had kept this 16 years. He'd never shown it to me, never mentioned it. He'd just held it, like a weapon in a locked drawer, waiting until I was ready to use it. Beneath the disc were financial records encased in sheet protectors. I recognized the format immediately: personal checks and receipts. The first check was from Victor's account, dated January 3rd. Pay to the order of Denise Quinn. Amount $600. Memo line: final guardianship payment, Mara. Honest. Brutal. Clipped to it was a thin, faded receipt from an electronics chain dated January 5th. One item only: 40-inch HD television. Total $599 plus tax. They hadn't even waited 72 hours to spend me. Underneath lay printouts of tax returns, years of them. Form 1040 after Form 1040, spread across 16 filing seasons, and on every single one, under Dependents, 2 names: Sophie Quinn, daughter; Mara Quinn, daughter. They'd used me to claim the child tax credit, earned income credit, and more, year after year. They'd checked boxes for head of household, leveraging the maximum benefit. They'd signed the bottom of each form under penalties of perjury. I closed the folder for a moment. I didn't feel sadness. That had burned out years ago. I felt something colder, cleaner, the feeling of numbers finally lining up. I slid the disc into an external USB DVD drive I'd brought. Sleek offices don't bother with legacy tech. Victor always said if something really matters, keep a copy that doesn't need Wi-Fi. I packed the drive, the red folder, and my laptop into a hard-sided briefcase. The room was very quiet. Not empty, just waiting. Before I left, I made one more call: the State Office of Inspector General, Fraud and Public Assistance Division. I gave them names, dates, and case references. I told them exactly where their suspects would be on Monday morning and exactly what those suspects would be signing. They were very interested. Monday, 9 a.m. The mediation took place on the 40th floor of a downtown tower, floor-to-ceiling windows, a conference table big enough to host a wedding, the air conditioning set to mild hypothermia. In the far corner of the ceiling, a little red light glowed above a dome camera, standard for recorded legal sessions, for everyone's protection. Today, that tiny light was the most dangerous thing in the room. I arrived early and chose a seat at the far end of the table, back to the window, red folder closed in front of me. My suit was plain gray, my hair pulled back, forgettable. The elevator dinged. My biological family emerged like a troupe arriving for a performance. Denise led, in a dramatic black wrap dress, jewelry chosen to say tasteful, not tacky. Her eyes swept the view, calculating. Brian lurked just behind, hair thinner, gut thicker, trying to look solemn and landing somewhere near queasy. Sophie, my younger sister, trailed them. She was glued to her phone, complaining about the parking fee before the doors had fully opened. They saw me. They didn't flinch. To them, I was still the kid on the porch, the signature between them and almost $12 million. Denise didn't offer a hello. She dropped her handbag onto the table with a heavy thump and addressed Naomi instead of me. "Let's make this quick," she said crisply. "We have a booking for brunch." Naomi's shark smile appeared. Of course. Before we discuss numbers, there's one standard form we need to execute because the will's been contested. She slid a single-page document across the table toward Denise and Brian. Kinship and care affidavit, she said. It verifies that you maintained a continuous parental relationship with Mara from January 2007 to the present. The executor needs it on file before any distribution. It was the bait. Perfectly legal, perfectly lethal. Keene, their lawyer, adjusted his tie and skimmed the document. I saw the exact moment his pupils shrank as he hit paragraph 4. This defines continuous care as uninterrupted physical, financial, and emotional support, he muttered. You told me she ran away, Denise. If you signed this, you're swearing she's been in your care the whole time, under oath. He started to pull the paper back. We should revise this language, or at least... Denise snatched it out of his hand. Stop nickel and diming me, Jack. Of course we raised her. Her voice dropped, practiced and wounded. You know we did our best, Mara. You were always difficult, but we never stopped loving you. She wanted me to argue, to yell, to give her something to twist. I just looked at her. She signed with a theatrical flourish, then shoved the pen at Brian. Sign. He hesitated for a half-second, eyes flicking from the paper to Keene's strained face. I could see the calculation, the almost $12 million on one side, the lawyer's warning on the other. But 16 years of following Denise's orders beat 3 seconds of doubt. He signed. The air in the room shifted. They thought they'd secured the fortune. They'd just signed Exhibit A. That affidavit did 3 things at once. It confirmed, under penalty of perjury, that they'd raised me continuously. It anchored every fraudulent benefit and tax credit they'd taken for a missing child. And it created a clean, recorded statement that they were committed to the lie. Sophie finally looked up from her phone. Can we talk numbers now? This is taking forever. Of course, I said, placing my hand on the red folder. But before we discuss money, we need to review the history. Denise laughed, brittle. We just signed your form. Don't play games. We've suffered enough. I opened the folder. The mini DVD into the external drive. The drive connected to my laptop. The laptop connected to the room's projector with a short HDMI cable that clicked into place. What are you doing? Brian's voice cracked. Opening the books, I said. The screen on the wall flickered from the firm's screensaver to grainy black and white footage. Timestamp 01/03/07/19/13/02. A front porch. Snow swirling sideways crossing the camera. A younger Denise in a heavy coat, clipboard in one hand. A skinny teenager with a duffel bag and a rolling suitcase. Me. There was no audio. There didn't need to be. Denise slapped the clipboard into the girl's chest. The girl signed. Denise jerked her thumb toward the street and stepped back. The front door closed. The girl walked off the porch into the white. Turn that off. Denise jolted to her feet, chair screeching on the hardwood. That's private. You can't. Sit down. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. Something in my tone made her obey. Naomi laid a copy of the $600 check and the electronics receipt on the table between us. Do you recognize this? Your signature is on the back. Denise's eyes flicked down, her name in familiar loops endorsing the check from Victor Hale. You told the press I ran away, that I disappeared in a blizzard. I pointed to the frozen frame of her on the porch. You didn't lose me, Denise. You sold me, Denise. I tapped the receipt, and 2 days later you used almost all the dollars to buy a television. Silence. No one moved. Even Sophie stopped tapping her screen. Brian reached out, trembling as if he could snatch the paper away and make it all vanish. Keene's hand hit his wrist like a trap, fingers white at the knuckles. He wasn't protecting them, he was protecting his bar card. And this, I said, tapping the fresh affidavit with one finger, is you swearing just now that you supported me for 16 straight years. I dropped the stack of tax return printouts and state benefit records on the table with a heavy slap. I leaned forward. Your choice is simple. You stick with your story that you raised me, then those signatures become admissions. You go to prison for tax fraud, wire fraud, and benefits fraud. We have the paperwork, the timeline, and your brand new sworn statement. Or you admit on record that you sold your minor child for $600 and lied on this affidavit. In which case, you keep your fraud problems and pick up perjury and child abandonment charges on top. I closed the folder for a moment. I sat back. You didn't walk into a negotiation, you walked into an evidentiary hearing you arranged for yourselves. For a heartbeat, the only sound was the faint hum of the air conditioning. Then Denise tried the last card in her deck. We were desperate, she stammered. We can explain this. Mara, sweetheart, please, we can fix this if we all just calm down. I stood, closing the red folder. I didn't call the local police. They're slow, and you've got practice crying on camera. 3 heads snapped up. I called the State Office of Inspector General, Fraud and Public Assistance Division 3 days ago. Fraud and Public Benefits Division. They've been very patient. The conference room door. It didn't work this time. Brian sagged, gray-faced as they read him his rights. They shuffled out past the little red camera light that had recorded every second. Sophie stared after them, pale. Then she whipped around to me, eyes wide and furious. You can't just walk away, she snapped, grabbing my sleeve. I didn't sign anything. You owe me something. I'm your sister. I gently unhooked her fingers. The night I got a snowstorm and a one-way ticket, you got a new car with search fund money. If you're hungry, sell it. Her mouth opened and closed. No sound came out. Naomi slipped the signed affidavit and the tax documents back into the red folder and locked it into her briefcase. We walked to the far end of the office where a shredder waited by the copy station. I took the electronics receipt, the last tangible proof of my price tag, and fed it into the blades. The machine hummed. In a few seconds, it was nothing but confetti. I didn't need to keep my price tag anymore. I knew exactly what I was worth now. I rode the elevator down 40 floors and stepped out into the bright, cold air of the city. No cameras, no microphones, no porch. For the first time since I was 14, I felt light, not forgiven, not healed, just free. If you believe DNA doesn't make a family, but honesty and loyalty do, hit subscribe. And tell me in the comments, what's the pettiest, most audacious thing someone in your family has ever done to you?